Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell, here with a look at the Alien franchise. The latest film, Alien Romulus, is in theaters now, but I wanted to take a look back at everything that has been produced as far as Ripley and Xenomorphs and the entire legacy of this Alien series. And believe it or not, there has been more Alien stuff than you probably know about. Yes, there's the movies that everybody's familiar with, but there have also been a number of shorts that were made over the years, some of them promotion for upcoming films, some of them celebrating the 40th anniversary of Alien, and there are also lots of special editions and alternate cuts for the first 4 movies. So I wanted to look at basically everything, do this ranking video, and at the end, I'm going to recommend a watch list for what I think is the best of the best as far as what has been put out there in the Alien universe and what I think would craft the optimal story. Unfortunately, not the ideal story, because not every movie's lived up to its potential, but the optimal story if you want to jump into the Alien universe. Now, it should go without saying that because I'm going to be talking about these movies, there will be some spoilers involved, including for Alien Romulus, which just came out. So if you haven't seen any of these films, or if you haven't seen Alien Romulus just yet, you should know that you might be spoiled on some plot details. And before we get to the movies themselves, I want to talk about the various Alien short films that have been released over the years. I didn't want to mix them up with the movies, but it is important to know that some of these short films do actually inform the stories of the movies, particularly Prometheus and Alien Covenant, and I think add to those movies. So I wanted to sort of separate these out, rank them separately, and then we'll move on to the movies. If you're not interested in the shorts, I've time-coded the video. You can go ahead and jump ahead to the movies. But let's go through the short films that have been released over the years, starting with my least favorite, and that one would be one that was released for Alien Covenant. It features an unidentified life form in the terraforming bay, and it's basically just to show off the lunar lander, which has Audi branding on it. Listen, every movie needs to make money at some point or other, and I guess I have to give the Alien Covenant team points for coming up with an inventive way to get branding into a movie that's set in the future without any of the current brands or technology. But yeah, this comes at the bottom because it adds nothing and it's just a commercial. Next up is a short that was released in conjunction with Prometheus. It's called Project Prometheus Mission, and it's essentially a recruiting video hosted by Elizabeth Bishop that's a primer on the plot of the movie using clips. It's the least creative of the different viral shorts that were created to promote Prometheus, and that's why it's so low on the list. Next up is another Prometheus short called the Wayland Industries Testimonial. It's from a Wayland scientist talking about how great the company is, intercut with flashes of horror from Prometheus. This is a tie-in for San Diego Comic-Con. Again, basically just another form of marketing. Next up is another one called Alien Covenant, She Won't Go Quietly, which features the character of Daniels, played by Catherine Waterston, bored on the ship and asking the computer mother questions, then frantically asking questions while running away from the xenomorph. Again, this is basically a glorified trailer for Alien Covenant, and not really anything that adds to the movie itself. The next short is one called Quiet Eye, Elizabeth Shaw, which is basically an intro to the character of Shaw from Prometheus, as she appeals to Weyland-Yutani to allow her to go and find the origins of life.
I believe there's a place where every one of those questions could be answered. I believe I know where that place is.
This is the first one of these shorts that's not basically a trailer for a movie or advertising a product, but it doesn't really add that much. It's, again, going back to the era when so many different movies, especially in the era of Damon Lindelof and Lost and The Dark Knight, were making these little puzzle pieces to scatter around the internet. It's not uninteresting, but it's the least consequential of the videos that were made of this type. Alien Covenant had something similar with a series of crew messages, which were messages from various crew members sent home before they went into cryosleep, delivered straight to camera.
I guess when I wake up, you are no longer going to be my baby brother. You're going to be older than me.
I suppose this is a nice introduction to the characters, but there's another short that came later that is a better introduction to these characters. Again, this is just more grist for the viral mill. Prometheus did one that's a little more artsy. It's called Prometheus Transmission, and it's basically an introduction to the characters in the film in the form of a training/mission log.
If we have found you, on behalf of everyone, I would like to say hello. I've been dreaming about you as long as I can remember.
This could have been pretty straightforward, but it's put together in a somewhat abstract way with long shots of nature and different things. It does plug you into the vibe of the film, which I think is good. It's not just kind of a standard, B-roll that we could capture with the cast on their day off kind of thing. So it goes a little bit higher on the list, but again, not very additive to the movie itself. This next short wasn't really part of the movie's release at all. It's called Alien Covenant, David's Lab, Last Signs of Life. life. It was a recreation of the lab set from Alien Covenant that was done at the YouTube space to celebrate the release of a Blu-ray set a couple years after Covenant came out. Basically, a person in a spacesuit is examining David's items in the lab. He finds an egg and there's a face hugger eventually. But because this was done a couple years after Covenant was released, it doesn't really do much to add anything to that movie. I do have to give kudos to the prop makers and the people that made this set. It's interesting to look at, but again, kind of in the middle of the list. Finally, on the more marketing side of things, there's a 45-second Rick and Morty short that was released to tie in with Alien Covenant, where a facehugger tries to get Rick but dies because his system is too full of drugs and alcohol.
Well, Rick, you know, they say don't do drugs, but I think this might be a case for him.
And alcohol, Morty.
Yeah, and alcohol.
Somebody get a memo to all the characters in those Alien movies, stat.
I mean, I have to give it points because it is a fresh piece of content for the internet and was tapping into a very popular show at that time. Rick and Morty's still popular, but 2017 Rick and Morty was like supernova hot popular. And it's fun to see those characters play around in the universe. I mean, obviously, circumstances have evolved that maybe make you see this era of Rick and Morty in a different way, but it's creative, it's somewhat funny. It's just so short that it doesn't make much of an impact. So that's the first tier of Alien shorts, which basically exists just for marketing. This next tier is material that was also used to market the movies, but I think that it also adds a little bit artistically or story-wise or plot-wise. The first of these shorts was produced for Alien Covenant, and it's called Meet Walter. It's basically an Apple-style ad showing the making of Michael Fassbender's character Walter from the film, and it is the second best viral video introducing a Michael Fassbender character in the Alien franchise. There's another one that I think is even better that we'll get to in a few minutes.
What is your name?
Walter. You're Walter.
Next up is the first of a couple of prologues that were produced for Alien Covenant. This one is called The Crossing, and it fills in some critical plot details that for some reason were cut out of the movie itself. It features Noomi Rapace's character, Elizabeth Shaw, and David as they travel on the ship. After they leave at the end of Prometheus, we see Shaw repairing David and operating the ship. And then we see that Shaw was put into cryosleep before David decided to kill everybody on the Creator's planets. It's a good bookend with what we learn of David at the end of the movie, and this really should have been incorporated into the film, whether as flashback or used as the beginning of the movie. And it's the first of a couple of different pieces that were put out on the internet for Alien Covenant that, had they been included, would have made that movie substantially better.
What if they're no better than us?
So long as they are no worse.
Next is the first of 6 short films that were commissioned for the 40th anniversary of the original Alien back in 2019. This one is called Alien Containment. A ship breaks up over a planet and 4 crew members are trapped together in an escape pod with an alien gestating inside of one of them. It's a nice little piece of paranoia and drives home the hopelessness that's in a lot of the Alien films. And it's not a bad short film. It ranks lowest of all of them simply because I thought the other 5 were better. Next up is a video called Alien Covenant Phobos, which is a special feature that you can find on the Blu-ray. It features the crew of the Covenant being strapped in and given a fear assessment. It's a good introduction and has a lot of good background info to these crew members and their psyches, but I don't think that it should have been included in the movie in the same way that I think a lot of other pieces from Alien Covenant should have. Still, I think it's very interesting. Next up is another 40th anniversary short called Alien Night Shift, which is set on the mining colony of LV-422. A miner has been face-hugged and is recovered from his ordeal and heads over to the supply depot to grab a drink, but all hell breaks loose when the alien begins to burst out of his chest, and one of the employees has to hunt the alien and try to kill it. Much like the previous short that I talked about, this isn't bad and it has some good atmosphere, but there were others that did similar things better. And another one of those 40th anniversary shorts is called Alien Alone, about the lone survivor of an evacuated, failing freighter who's attempting to access the lab area, which has only been restricted to the highest level of crew member, who are all gone. Eventually, this crew member does access the lab and forms a special bond with the facehugger inside. And the style in this short is top notch. It's really a little bit lower down the list because I think that the acting and the concept are a little less strong than the actual look of the short. Next up is another 40th anniversary short called Alien Specimen. A greenhouse technician finds out that a soil sample in her greenhouse has been infiltrated by a facehugger and has to escape having an alien put in her stomach while the greenhouse is on security lockdown with the help of her trusty companion. This is an effective short with good style and an ending that I didn't predict, which is why it goes a little bit higher up on the list. And from this point, we go into the upper tier of the Alien short films, the ones that I would recommend no matter what. And the first is another prologue for Alien Covenant called The Last Supper, set before the Covenant crew goes into cryosleep. You actually get to see James Franco with the crew before he goes to bed, and when he turns in for the night, the crew drinks and gambles on arm wrestling. It's really the only time that we get to see these couples happy together, and it does a lot to establish their bonds. I think that this would have helped the movie in that we would understand the characters better, but I understand why it's not in it because I don't necessarily know where it would have fit without diffusing the tension or perhaps making the beginning of the movie feel too long. So it's an understandable cut, but one that I think does improve Alien Covenant overall.
I just want to say I couldn't pick a better bunch of jerks to get marooned on a distant planet with.
Up next is another 40th anniversary short called Alien Ore, set on yet another mining colony. When miners discover that one of their colleagues has fallen victim to a chestburster, they have to make the difficult decision about whether to stay in the mine and fight the xenomorph or to go back up in the elevator and expose the rest of the colony to the deadly alien. I think this is one of the best looking of these 40th anniversary shorts and also underscores the themes of the franchise and proves why I think it was a clever idea to commission these 40th anniversary shorts. I'd never actually seen any of them before doing these videos, and I think that they're all worth a watch to varying degrees. Up next is another viral video introducing you to a Michael Fassbender character. It's called Happy Birthday David. It's a commercial for Wayland Synthetics that was produced in conjunction with Prometheus, and it really is a great performance from Michael Fassbender. He's so good as this character that he's able to crush it in a viral short.
I understand human emotions, although I do not feel them myself.
Happy Birthday David is the ideal scenario for one of these short films because it is a meaningful introduction to the character and it piques your interest about what you might actually see in the movie ahead. So I have to give them credit for doing this. Again, this was sort of a late 2000s, early 2010s thing when it hit its peak, and this is how it should be done. Next up is another short that was produced to help promote Prometheus. It is a Peter Wayland TED Talk set in the then faraway year of 2023, a world where humanity has cured cancer, found alien planets, and created androids. The one consistent thing about science fiction is that even if the future is only a decade away, it still has great optimism about the capabilities of humanity. Guy Pearce, who I think was underused in Prometheus, really crushes it in this short as Peter Wayland as he outlines his vision for the world and perfectly sets up what would become the Prometheus mission several decades later. And honestly, I think that this short could have and perhaps should have been the opening of Prometheus because it perfectly sets the stage for the plot and the themes of the film and everything that comes after, and as I mentioned, would have given Guy Pearce more to do.
These rules exist because the people who created them were afraid of what would happen if they didn't. Well, I am not afraid.
The number 2 slot on my list of favorite Alien shorts goes to another 40th anniversary short film. It's called Alien Harvest and takes place on a plasma harvester that's on collision course with a comet. The 4 surviving crew are trying to escape both the xenomorph and a fiery fate to try to get to the escape shuttle, only for a plot twist to completely recontextualize their situation. This was a fun little short. It looks great. It surprised me. And again, it drives home so many of the themes of the Alien films, the sinister nature of the Weyland-Yutani company, and the way that survivors don't necessarily know who to trust even in crisis situations. I think you should seek out all of these shorts, but if you're just going to seek out one, I think it should be Alien Harvest. Finally, at number 1 on this list is a short called Alien Covenant Advent, which features Michael Fassbender's David communicating with Weyland-Yutani seemingly after the credits roll on Alien Covenant. In the short, he goes through his lab and takes Weyland-Yutani step by step through exactly what he did in basically salvaging Elizabeth Shaw for parts and also experimenting with the organism that would eventually become the xenomorph. Not only does this short show you what David did on the planet, but it also shows you what his plans going forward were, including using the character of Daniels as the potential experimentation subject for the alien queen. And it actually sets up what would have been the third movie in this Ridley Scott prequel trilogy, and also starts to fill in those gaps about just how we got from Prometheus and Alien Covenant to the original 1979 Alien. It does what I thought was impossible, which makes me excited for what that third movie would have been. And I'm not necessarily saying it should have been incorporated into Alien Covenant as it was or as it is in this short, but all of this information is fascinating. It makes the plot make more sense, and it gives a sense of direction for where the franchise could have gone. I don't know if it would have changed the trajectory of the franchise completely, but I think that more than any of these other shorts, it completely recontextualizes Alien Covenant and adds so much to the movie. And I wish that we could have seen this in the film. I'm not really sure why they cut some of this stuff out, because I think that Alien Covenant is lesser for it. But this is why I think it's important to go out and seek out things like these shorts, because as much as many of them are advertisements and needless special features, some of them are actual useful and essential tools to understand the movies themselves. And speaking of the movies themselves, let's get to those films and start ranking them. This list contains 14 items that are either theatrical cuts of movies, official special editions that are alternate versions of the films, and then one digital series that I am counting as a long-form piece of quote-unquote content, because it is much longer than the shorts, and I don't think that it belongs in the shorts category. Now, when we talk about special editions, I'm not talking about an unrated version that's on a DVD or a Blu-ray. The special editions really only apply to the first 4 Alien films, because they're alternate versions of the movies that were released with the participation of or with the guidance in some way of the original directors that are substantially different from the theatrical cuts that we saw in theaters. And let's get to the bottom ranked movie on my list at number 14. And if you've seen all of the Alien films, then it's probably no surprise that this is my least favorite movie. It is Aliens vs. Predator Requiem, which is just a bad movie. Paper thin characters, cliche dialogue, and you can't see anything. The idea of a predator xenomorph hybrid is cool, but you never really get to see it. It takes the term dark to a whole new level, and really it is an extremely boring movie for a film that's about 2 of the most famous modern movie creatures duking it out on planet Earth for supremacy. I just did not enjoy sitting through this movie again. I'd seen it once before. I hope to never have to watch it again. Just dreadful. Even in context of this franchise, just a bad movie. At number 13 is its direct predecessor, AVP, Alien vs. Predator. And I mean, listen, this had potential. It was already a fan favorite story before the movie came out due to the Dark Horse comic book series that were released in the late 80s and early 90s. And AVP has some cool scenes and moments, but it takes forever to get going, and not in the interesting way like some other movies in the franchise, because the characters aren't interesting in any way. Plus, the choice to rate this film PG-13 was a stupid one that totally waters down the violence, and it clumsily tried to add to the alien mythology, which honestly has become a franchise trademark past Alien 3. Alien vs. Predator should have been an absolute slam dunk of a movie, and instead it is a total airball. It's only next to last on the list because it's slightly less unpleasant to sit through than Aliens vs. Predator Requiem, but still not really a fun experience when it should have been, at a minimum, a lot of fun. At number 12 is the digital series I mentioned. It is Alien Isolation, the digital series. I've never played the game Alien Isolation, but I've heard it's great. I didn't consider it for these rankings because that is sort of a different medium than either shorts or movies. This series came out several years after Alien Isolation, and it's a combination of cutscenes, game footage, and newly animated scenes, and I use that term very loosely, that are really barely animated. Some of the worst animation that I could imagine for a franchise this popular.
There's a killer.
A killer? What does that even mean?
I like the idea for Alien Isolation, but it really falls flat here because the combination of different things just doesn't work. Really, all it did was make me want to play the game, which I've heard is very good. But when you're making a digital series like this, it really shouldn't act as something that just makes you want to do something more. And, hey, at least it's above the Alien versus Predator movies, but not by that much. Next up is Alien Resurrection Special Edition. This was overseen by director Jean-Pierre Jeunet for the Alien Quadrilogy set and has about 13 minutes of new and alternate footage. There are some small touches in this special edition that are improvements over the theatrical cut, like references to Newt, which are great.
Ripley. Ripley, what is it?
And there are some opportunities to get to know the characters better, but the new beginning to the movie, which was Jeuné's original idea, is so badly done and starts the movie off on a terrible note, and the alternate ending, while similar to the one of the theatrical cut, I think is a complicated downgrade from the original. When you talk about these Alien special editions, this one is much more of an alternate cut than an alternate version of the movie. And on balance, I think that the additions, particularly at the beginning and the end, outweigh the good things that were added. So that's why it comes in below the next movie on my list, which is the theatrical cut of Alien Resurrection. And honestly, this movie isn't as bad as I remembered it being, but it's still not great. It feels very late 90s in its ideas of cutting-edge production design and hip new characters. I like the idea of a hybrid Ripley who doesn't really remember her past and has some sort of sympathy for the xenomorphs, but that idea isn't really developed enough. It does have one great scene where Ripley discovers all of her previous clones, and that scene is totally carried by Sigourney Weaver, who is fully committed in the movie, and the underwater sequence is kind of cool, but this is squarely in the era where the xenomorphs were just used as slashers, and Alien Resurrection really reminds me of another of its contemporary films, Jason X. It also predated Catwoman as far as random what the hell is going on basketball scenes in movies from French directors. Catwoman's director Pitoff was actually the special effects supervisor for this film, and I guess he saw the basketball scene in Alien Resurrection and said, hey, you know what? I'm going to steal that idea for my movie. Joss Whedon wrote the script for this movie and has largely distanced himself from it, which is really saying something. And overall, it's just not that good. I do like Ron Perlman, though. Always a highlight.
Well, now, if you don't want to play basketball, I know some other indoor sports.
Up next on my list is another theatrical cut, the theatrical cut of Alien 3, directed by David Fincher. And Fincher notoriously had his original vision for the film butchered by the studio, which is why Alien 3 feels like a compromise. It has interesting ideas that it never really develops and basically just turns into a haunted house slasher movie. It also features some horrendously bad special effects that turn the xenomorph into a literal cartoon, and absent fleshing out the deeper themes of the movie and really understanding what Ripley is going through, Alien 3 is largely derailed by, in this cut, an infuriating decision to kill off Newt and Hicks from the previous film. It just feels like a slap in the face to Aliens. Fincher gives the movie a great look, and Sigourney Weaver is solid as always, along with Charles S. Dutton, Charles Dance, and other cast members not named Charles. But this version of Alien 3 is ultimately a disappointment, although there is a chance for redemption with another version that we'll talk about later. Next up on the list is Prometheus, the prequel to Alien, directed by Ridley Scott, released in 2012. Prometheus has some interesting ideas, but I think overall it's a pretty big mess. I'm on board for an Alien prequel, and I'm on board for a Ridley Scott rumination on technology and man playing God, but those two just didn't fit well together here. It doesn't fully deliver as a prequel and actually raises more questions about the franchise than it answers, and its heavy thematic elements are watered down by all of the franchise stuff that it feels obligated to include. There is one good thing about Prometheus that pretty much everybody agrees on, and that's Michael Fassbender as David, one of the great franchise characters. This could have been a much more successful movie without what was obviously a bumpy development process, but ultimately what we got was a movie that really didn't seem like it was made for anybody. I think that its reputation has improved a little bit over the years and was actually slightly better than I remembered it, but I think it is largely a missed opportunity because it just can't quite figure out what it wants to do. Next up are two films that I put on pretty equal footing as movies that have some really good parts and also some parts that I don't like so much. And the movie I'm going to talk about first is the one that just came out, Alien Romulus. I did like this movie, but I guess because I didn't love it, everybody thinks that I hate it. I anticipated in my original review that this would be a divisive film because it has stuff that really works and stuff that really doesn't, and I think the reaction has kind of borne that out. Fede Alvarez does a great job at establishing atmosphere and giving us some really good xenomorph horror sequences, but the movie's obsession with tying itself to the past is what almost sinks the entire thing for me, starting with the deep fake resurrection of Ian Holm as the android Rook. This was a critical blow for me. I don't think this technology works, and I still feel weird about it being used to bring back dead actors in roles like this. It's also a huge black mark on Rogue One for me, pretty much the only major issue that I have with that film, and in nearly 10 years, I don't think that the technology has improved that much. I also didn't like the shoehorned callbacks, like bringing back the "get away from her, you bitch" line. And while the last 20 minutes get credit for being bold, they're also very similar to the finale of Alien Resurrection. Alien Romulus is a movie of highs and lows, and there are sequences that I actually can't wait to see again. It's also the only film that I've only seen once. It's the freshest movie of the bunch, so I'd say it's especially prone to moving a little higher or a little lower up or down the list, but I don't think that it really poses much risk of getting too far near the top or falling too far toward the bottom. Next up is another flawed film, Alien Covenant, but I liked this one substantially more on rewatch than I remembered liking it the first time. It's definitely got its issues. It suffers from some of the same problems as Prometheus, but it is a little more focused and delivers what I think are some classic franchise sequences. I'd put it, as I said, at just about even par with Alien Romulus, but I think that the really strong cast gives it an edge. Plus, we get not one, but two Michael Fassbenders as the androids David and Walter, and Fassbender really is giving it his all here. Not many actors could pull off kissing and fingering themselves in a movie.
Watch me. I'll do the fingering. Go on.
I think the biggest problem with Alien Covenant is that the xenomorph stuff really does feel like a bit of an afterthought, and it still doesn't really get us closer to definitively tying the story all together, largely because some of the things that I talked about that were in the shorts were not in the film. But I also think that there is a lot to like here, and my opinion has improved over time, although the utter stupidity of the characters throughout this movie is also a big sticking point for me. Still, if you haven't seen Alien Covenant in a while and you remember it as being a terrible movie largely because of the hype about the franchise returning to its roots, which is what seems to happen every 5 to 10 years, maybe give it another shot, because I think, like me, you may like it just a little bit more than you remembered. All right, we're getting into the top 5 now, and at number 5 on this list, and really the biggest jump for any movie when we talk about different versions, is the Alien 3 Special Edition, which I had not seen until I was rewatching all of the movies for this video. I'd heard that this version was better, but I really wasn't prepared for just how much it improves the film. The bones are the same, but it really is a masterclass on how a studio can completely alter the impact of a movie just by trimming away what they see as fat, but what are actually a movie's vital organs. The special edition that's widely available now was released in 2010, and it is a spruced up version of the 2003 assembly cut. They went back and upgraded the footage and integrated it smoothly, I think. I didn't really see any seams. Now, David Fincher was not directly involved in putting together the special edition. It was based on his notes from the editing room, so you can't really say it is his director's cut, but you can definitely see how much closer it is to the original vision he had for the film, because the themes of the movie actually make sense. While it's still a haunted house movie with some dodgy special effects, this version fleshes out the prisoners on Fury 161 and really establishes the theme of the film, which is basically that these characters, including Ripley, are essentially damned to purgatory, waiting for the final judgment. This is key to the effect of the whole movie, and its absence is what undercuts the theatrical version. It also softens the decision to kill off Newt and Hicks, because Ripley's story is much more in this version about a character who's been condemned to death since the Nostromo and has been avoiding her fate until she chooses her own fate and throws herself into the furnace at the end of the movie, taking control from Weyland-Yutani and redeeming the sacrificial deaths of everyone that she's loved. This special edition doesn't make Alien 3 a perfect film, but it does make it a much, much better movie. And in a franchise that has a middle tier full of imperfect films, I think that this is the version of Alien 3 that best represents what was at one time meant to be the end of Ripley's story.
This is as good a place as any to take our first steps to heaven.
So now we get to our top 4, but if you've been ticking these movies off your list, you will realize that there are only 2 films left, and this is the eternal debate between Alien fans. Which movie is better, Alien or Aliens? And the fact that both movies have director's cuts / special editions makes that decision both more difficult and, in my case, just a little bit easier. At number 4 is the quote-unquote director's cut of 1979's Alien, which isn't really a director's cut. Ridley Scott has openly said that he prefers the theatrical version and that this one was done basically just to make money, and the results bear out what he's saying, because I don't think there's anything in this cut that improves Alien, and I think that there are several things that make it less effective. Yes, it's cool to see the xenomorph hanging from chains above Harry Dean Stanton, and the movie reincorporates the scene of Dallas alive and cocooned, which at one time was one of the most famous deleted scenes ever. But the theatrical cut of Alien, in my opinion, is one of the best paced movies of all time. The tension happens at just the right moments. It's like a Swiss clock. It runs so efficiently. And the changes made here mess with that pace, cutting some moments that worked and adding moments in places that interrupt the flow. It's interesting to see this material, but I think it hurts the movie overall. And for those reasons, it bumps this version of Alien down to number 4 on the list. At number 3 on the list is the theatrical cut of James Cameron's 1986 sequel, Aliens. There is nothing wrong with the theatrical cut of this movie. It's tight, it's iconic for a reason, and it works as a movie. Like the Lord of the Rings films, this theatrical version is a perfectly good movie on its own terms, and the additions that were made only serve to enhance the greatness that was already there. James Cameron really pulled off something with Aliens, completely changing tone, basically switching genres, but also cementing the Alien legacy for good, and I think really writing Ripley's legacy as a character. Sigourney Weaver got an Oscar nomination for this movie, which is a rarity for a pure genre film, and deservedly so. Aliens remains, along with the first movie, in a class by itself in this franchise, and I don't really have any criticisms of the movie. I just happen to think that there are versions of these 2 films that work better. So I've kicked the can down the road a little bit with these different editions of Alien and Aliens, but we're now at the top 2, and I have to make up my mind now and decide which of these 2 movies do I like better, and it is such a hard choice. If I could, I would just name one of them 1A and the other one 1B, but that kind of defeats the purpose of doing a ranking video. So let's get to this controversial decision that I wrestled with for a while and get to my number 2 movie on the list, and it is the theatrical cut of Alien from 1979. As I said before, this cut, in my opinion, is pretty close to a perfect film. It starts slow, then builds the intrigue, springs the horror trap when that alien bursts out of John Hurt's chest, and then ratchets the tension up all the way until the final scene in the escape pod. I've probably seen Alien 10 times or more, and yet every single time I see the movie, I am engrossed from beginning to end, and it flies by even though I know every single thing that's going to happen. It's also a great example of a script that's able to craft characters that we care about and who have distinct personalities despite limited screen time, which is a combination of good writing and good casting. Alien is an all-time great flat out, and if it's number 1 on your list, I don't blame you, because it very easily could have been number 1 on this list, but I had to give it to the movie that I did pick number 1, and that is the special edition of Aliens. Even though I'd probably give you a different answer about what number 1 is on this list depending on which day you ask me, what puts the special edition of Aliens over the top for me is what it adds to an already great movie. James Cameron has openly said that this is his preferred cut of the movie, and for good reason, and this is yet another example, though not quite as drastic as Alien 3, about why studio notes can sometimes make a movie worse. As a matter of fact, they often make a movie worse. Of all the head scratchers when it comes to things that were cut out of a film, I will never get why Fox thought it was a good idea to cut out Ripley's daughter having died while she was adrift in space in cryosleep. It informs every single thing she does in the movie from that point on and adds so much to her story with Newt. Sigourney Weaver was allegedly furious when she found out that this had been cut from the movie, and I can get why. It was essential to her character. I also like that we get to meet Newt and her parents before the Marines arrive. I think the sentry gun sequence is cool and further develops just how threatened these characters are. Hudson gets more time to boast about being a total badass before proving that he is actually a total wimp, and we even get a little bit more between Ripley and Hicks.
See you, Hicks.
Dwayne. It's Dwayne.
Ellen.
Others disagree, but I don't think that anything that was added to the Alien Special Edition is unnecessary or takes away from the film, and I think that some of the additions add crucial context that makes Aliens better. And in a game of inches, the improvements that were made to the Special Edition of Aliens put it just that much ahead of the Alien theatrical cut when it comes to crowning a queen, if you will, of the Alien franchise.
Get away from her, you bitch!
So those are my rankings for the Alien films and shorts that were released, but there's so much there, so many different versions and so many short films. Where would somebody start if they even wanted to start watching this series from the beginning and watching the stuff that represents the best of what the series has to offer? Well, I put together what I would recommend as my personal watch list, the Ripley order, if you will, and I will tell you right now that it omits everything after Alien 3. In this version of the Alien story, Ripley's story ends with that third Alien film. So combining the best of the shorts with the best of the movies, my recommendation for the Ripley watch order would be to start with the Peter Wayland TED 2023 short film, followed by Prometheus, then 2 of the Alien Covenant prologue films, The Crossing, which picks up basically right after the credits roll on Prometheus, as well as The Last Supper, which leads right into the film. Then watch Alien Covenant, followed by Alien Covenant Advent, which tells you a little bit more about what happened both during and after the movie. Then watch the Alien theatrical cut, followed by the film that comes next in chronology, which is Alien Romulus. Then I would recommend 3 of the 40th anniversary shorts, which I think kind of tell the story of aliens and facehuggers spreading around the galaxy and set up more of the story that happens in Aliens. I'd recommend Alien Ore, Alien Specimen, and Alien Harvest. Then enjoy a double feature with the Aliens Special Edition, followed by Alien 3 Special Edition, both of which I think are improvements. In one case, some major improvements. In another case, substantial improvements, basically making it a whole new movie, and a great way to end Ripley's run in the franchise. So those are my thoughts on the Alien films. What do you think? Is your order similar? Is it completely different? I'm sure a lot of people would have Romulus a lot higher and Covenant a lot lower, and Prometheus also has a lot of fans. Let me know down in the comments below, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned right here on the channel for more movie news, reviews, ranking videos, box office, all the stuff that I love to do here. And most of all, thank you for spending a significant part of your day right here with me. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.